Dr. Tommy K. Begay is a faculty affiliate assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry, College of Medicine at the University of Arizona. He is the founder of Beauty Way Wellness and Psychosocial Health Consultation. Dr. Begay is a cultural psychologist by academic training, focusing on the interrelationship of culture, biology, and environment. He possesses a Master of Public Health degree with a specialty in international health. He is originally from Navajo and currently resides in Tucson, Arizona. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Yeah, literally that's a warm welcome. I'm gonna have to take my jacket off and my shirt off. It's a little warm in here, but I guess there's a lot of energy, which is good, you know. I'm honored, as I mentioned this morning, to be here with all of you as healthcare providers, as healers, working with children, working with families, working with all the things that you do to improve the lives of people. Thank you very much for what you do. I really want to emphasize that I'm moving beyond academia. I'm moving out of the Department of Psychiatry. The university structure is not as supportive as I would like them to be in terms of the work that I do, because it's a lot of places. It's about bringing in funds. It's about bringing in grants, and for the work that I do, there isn't a lot of funding out there. So I decided that I would rather spend my time and energy working on my own. But I still am an affiliate. What that means is I write support papers, manuscripts. I have a couple of mentees that are PhD students there in the college, and their interest is also, again, looking at how adverse childhood experiences, what I refer to as adverse childhood stress, has a potential, because this doesn't happen to everybody, has a potential to impact the lives of these individuals when they become adults. So I want to also put out a disclaimer, or at least an explanation. You know, when we talk about trauma, the things that happen doesn't mean everybody gets affected by it. You know, there are certain buffering systems. What I mean by buffer is that love, I believed on the opposite end of the spectrum, that love absorbs some of that. And I was really disappointed in not being able to show some very powerful slides this morning. One is Shamasana Ba Sosi Yan. When we have as you already, most of us, I always have to explain this, you know. When somebody passes away, we always say, yeah, they used to be here with us. So she was a herbologist, a medicine, I'll just call her loosely a medicine woman. She made medicines from plants. And when things were crazy in my home, I spent time with her. I would stay with her, and she used to take me out. She taught me about the plants. She taught me also about just a rough idea as a little boy about and really the concept of balance, the concept of the necessity to be gentle, to be kind. But also, she was a tough woman, like a lot of us are. You know, a lot of my sister. She lives in Old Sawmill, just north of Fort Defiance. She lives by herself. She chops wood. She takes care. In Sawmill, we get like 2 feet of snow when it snows. So she's out shoveling. She takes care of herself. She takes care of the dogs, and she lives that way. Like a lot of us, we're very resilient. We live in circumstances where, whether we like it or not, we have to do some things. And so, my great grandmother, she was very resilient. She used to even laugh about the men when they would cuss and whine about how bad things were. She'd kind of follow them around and say, "God damn it!" It's like she'd just kind of slap her hands and she'd laugh about them. And we as grandkids, we'd sit on the bed, in the hogan, we just laugh at her. She just she would just make fun of them, because she thought it was funny how the men would get all upset and get dramatic about things. And she was never like that. She looked at ways of figuring things out. But more importantly, what she set the foundation for me is also this notion of the feminine spirit, of being gentle, being kind. But also for me, in my journey with, with addiction, that was the way out for me, to be kind to myself, but also to be gentle and kind to those in my circle, especially my children. I have a daughter. I'm very blessed. She's class of 2020 Stanford graduate, political science. She wants to go to law school, and she's working on that now. She works with an organization called the Water Protectors Collective, and they work internationally with indigenous groups to support legal environmental cases. And so she's getting a real good understanding of the work that she wants to do with environment, but also indigenous people. So I want to emphasize, every time I do this presentation, I show a picture of her. Though I have an uncle, Frank Torici Niyan. He was a code talker, Marine, the training of our code talkers. They're Marines, they're big, they've done some things. The badass fighting group in the world renowned. That's what internationally, that's what people see the Marines as being. They were real tough guys and did a lot of things for the other countries around the world. But my uncle, he always had a smile. He was always very gentle. When you shake his hand, he just kind of puts his hand out, He wasn't like this big macho man, and trying to rip your hand off. He was very gentle. He always had his grandkids around him, He always had the little ones around him. And I was just like, that's my uncle, my father's brother. Then there was my father. My father was alcoholic, and he had learned some things, how to deal with. He's very, we can talk about men in general and the insecurities, and there are strong insecurities growing up for all kinds of reasons. And so a lot has to do with the fear, a lot has to do with the pain of growing up and feeling like you're not good enough. Maybe somebody said that. Maybe a parent said that. Maybe a caregiver said that. But there was my uncle, the code talker, and there was my father. And when I was in high school, we invited him to dinner, and he told a story about how, as a code talker, they got intel that there was a hut full of the enemy, the Japanese, and they waited till nightfall. They put their bayonets, the knives on the end of the rifles. And they waited for nightfall, and they stormed that hut. They killed everybody inside. And it turns out there was only women and children in that hut, but they couldn't see that in the dark. So all the screaming, all the pain, all of the trauma that went with that, this man carried around with him. But you would never know that. I never knew that until he told this story. But it stuck with me. Again, this man that carried himself in a way, in a blessing way, in a beautiful way. My father, who went through the boarding school system, who went through his own trauma, and the ways he dealt with that trauma was also being a very violent man. He used alcohol to deal with his with the pain that he was feeling, with his insecurities. But you mix alcohol with fear and pain, and you get a very volatile situation. It's horrific. You read in the paper, what men do to children, what men do to their partners, their spouses. And so this kind of framed in my mind that that the essence of that pain and that fear is really sort of what we develop as children, what we acquire, what we learn as children, and how that manifests into our personalities. So when we become older, that so much we don't realize we're doing it. And especially if we want to change it. One of the first things we do if we want to change something is to admit that we have a problem that needs to be changed. And if we don't do that, we look for excuses. And I see this in the profession of therapeutic work that we do. I see this in the literature, the research that I do, the papers that I see. But more importantly, I saw this in myself. You know, I've been to three residential treatment centers. Then I always BS myself and I BS others. Oh yeah, you're right. I got it. Right on. I'm gonna go home and I'll be healed. Oh yeah. 2 months later, back at it again. I didn't take it seriously until I finally realized I had driven from from Los Angeles to Tucson, 8 hours in an alcoholic blackout. And that scared me. And I thought, you know what? I could have easily went head on. I could have easily gotten an accident with a family, killed some children. And that's when I made up my mind that I need to change. So coming back to my uncle, the badass Navajo code talker, you know, and what he did. And so, you know, coming back to, you know, and the blessing way, I really began to understand the blessing way, you know, in terms of, you know, if you listen to the prayer, you know, blessing way, that's another image I wanted to show this morning. You know, there's a corn stalk, and then the corn pollen runs right in the middle. Then you got corn, these leaves of corn. But those corn also represent the different classes of ceremony that the Navajo have. There's enemy way, there's blessing way, there's night chant. There's these different classes of ceremony. But what runs through all of them is blessing way, runs the corn pollen. And so that corn, because of that, every ceremony opens and closes with blessing way. So I've been blessed. I've been given the opportunity to sit in the Hogan and listen to what that blessing way prayer is. And like everything else I'm going to talk about today, this is my interpretation. This is what I see when I look in the mirror. You know, my interpretation is that in the prayer, our dominant hand is the right hand, the 5 finger. The people, our dominant hand is the right hand. We carry the corn pollen pouch in that hand. The sacredness that ties us to the earth, ties us to the universe. The yin, the net, do, a changing woman, Mother Earth. That's a representation of corn pollen. Do, in our less dominant hand, we carry the arrowhead. And the arrowhead represents you take a stand. You take a stand for what? You take a stand for what is sacred. Your relationships, your love, your children, the earth, the universe. So they work together. The corn pollen pouch with also the arrowhead. So that's what really the balance is all about. When I hear the prayer of blessing way, it's that balance that comes together. We can't just get run over and expect change. You got to take a stand sometimes. You got to fight. You got to think about things. You got to take action. There's even a saying, and I don't remember how it goes in the Navajo language, about if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because of me. And that's a strong foundation. That's something that we live by. It's that you make yourself responsible for taking care of others and for the changes that need to be made. So when I look in the mirror, this is the tatatin do, the arrowhead. But from a training of neuroscience, it's also the corn pollen pouch represents that parasympathetic nervous system, that place of peace, that place of calm, that place of hajon. And I mentioned the impact of sleep. There are 3. There are probably more. I'm just going to talk about 3 major changes or implementations of sleep. One is that during rapid eye movement, what we call REM sleep, short-term memory gets converted to long-term memory. And if you don't get that sleep, you don't learn, because you don't have the neurons that get connect to cortex or cortices, that wrinkly part of the brain. That doesn't happen because you're not sleeping, you're not resting. Sleep becomes very important. Another aspect of sleep is there's a hormone system called leptin and ghrelin, and it's in your adipose tissue. Nice way of saying fat around your belly. It's in your adipose tissue. And so when you don't sleep, there's an imbalance of those two hormones. And that imbalance leads to hunger. Your hunger sensation. You might be eating all afternoon, all night. There's no reason to eat. There's no reason your body doesn't need to have more calories or any more vitamins. But because of that imbalance in those hormones, leptin and ghrelin, because you're not getting enough sleep, you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep, you have this sensation of eating. That's why sometimes when we're really sleepy, we feel like eating something. Maybe McDonald's cheeseburger or French fries, make it worse, really make it saturated fats. But that's, again, the imbalance because of lack of sleep. Though the other issue that sleep is, and I mentioned this morning, is that during slow wave sleep, there are 5 stages of sleep. During slow wave sleep, the cerebral spinal fluid that flows through our central nervous system, that's the spinal cord in the brain, floods the brain. And during that flooding of the brain, like washing my hair, during that flooding of the brain, all the toxins are removed and exit. There are vacuoles that remove all the waste. And again, slow wave sleep. Gotta have sleep. But if we're not getting that slow wave sleep, that's not happening. And it's been linked. This is recent research, probably three years now. Those what we call beta particles or other proteins, they lodge in the cortex, and that's over a period of time is associated. Well, is the basis for Alzheimer's disease or cognitive issues, cognitive problems. So sleep is important. But because of, again, the impact of trauma, we don't get to sleep. We're hyper-vigilant. This is my interpretation of being hyper-vigilant. This is always going on. This is annoying as heck. It's irritating. But because our nervous system doesn't shut down, this is the way some of us live. So maybe I want to shut this thing off. All right, stop it, Tommy. I want to shut this thing off. Maybe I might self-medicate, and that'll put my brain to sleep. And that's really what, again, one of the symptoms of fentanyl and synthetic opioid is it slows the breathing down to the point where it stops, and then you die unless you have a Narcan or some other agent that reverses the process. So. Again, this is, I'm going to get real soon. I'll get to what the historical trauma, how this fits in. But I want to just kind of tie in. This is what happened to those to this process. What happened to what happened to Shamasana Doshiche, in their practicing of their ways. Why are we having this? Why is this conference so important? And more importantly, what is happening to our culture? What is happening to our young people? What is happening to our land? So it's really all tied together. So I just kind of wanted to these are really important slides this morning that I didn't really get a chance to. We saw this one this morning. We're not going to waste time with that. We saw this one. Any questions? You let me know if you have a question, and I want to go back. I
have one real quick. You didn't finish it this morning, but somebody asked about gaming. You said it was a good and kind of bad. But
depends on.
Depending on what type of games and stuff like that. So in breaking the cycle, would you do leaning and weaning off kind of deals? Or?
Yeah. Well, I think that sometimes we.
I know there's a lot of kids nowadays. They're on it.
Yeah, I would with my grandson.
Yeah.
He's got his own. He plays games with some of his classmates.
Oh, yeah.
They have a headset on and they're talking to each other.
That's
so he's limited. And as soon as I get with him, we do homework. And he loves multiplication tables. He loves doing that kind of stuff. And I'm there to help him too, to guide him through some of those questions for elementary school kids. Holy, I can't even understand what they want. So anyway, that's beside the point. But what I'm getting at is that, you know, if you give structure to children, not just all of a sudden, you know, if they don't do it, you hit them or whatever, you know, you kind of, they'll work with you. And that's really what the essence of parenting is to teach, to work with your children. So that if you want this, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to negotiate. Coming back to my dog, you know, if my dog doesn't act the way we need him to act, then he doesn't come with us. He really wants to come with us. He needs that pack. He's afraid of being alone. You know, he gets anxiety. He scratches all kinds of things. So we bring him along. He's there. You know, he gets the love. We center him. So kind of coming back to your question again, it really depends on the situation, but I would set up a structure so that as long as the game is, rated G and not an X-rated game or, you know, something bad for them, then I would allow that to happen. But also outside play is really good, you know. So that's the way I would handle it, is to, you know, talk. I think we haven't really talked with our kids. We just kind of, we just expect them, we expect them to figure it out themselves, and that's not good. Then we get mad when they don't, you know.
What you just explained about the brain and how that sleep impacts the brain, and then you have these little tabs of the different parts of the brain. So if the brain is impacted by the drugs that are being utilized, look at how it's going to impact the eyes, the ears, the hand, all that. That's interesting to me.
Absolutely. This is all the good stuff.
Yeah.
But let's just say also the intergenerational trauma, the adverse childhood experiences, that also has an impact on the brain. Okay, so that's my whole point for showing this slide. As a cultural psychologist, you know, culture again is really, I'm talking about learned behavior, but it's development. But the thing we really need to worry about with substances is addiction. That takes on a whole different, hits different parts of the brain. Addiction, again, I heard a definition of addiction earlier, and I kind of went like this, you know, and I think, you know, our brain becomes dependent upon that substance, and it has to have that substance, okay? If it doesn't get that substance, then we go through, the body's going to physiologically, you know, begin to break down. That's why when we bring in somebody who's been, you know, on a spree, we got to watch them. We got to be careful, because if they, you know, we got to be able to give them medical care in case they don't come out of their, you know, their intoxication. But the definition, you know, of an addiction is the brain physiologically depends upon a substance, and it has to get that substance, and it feels normal. But with opioids, man, it's so potent. But also the feeling you get when you're high, you don't want to do anything, and then you start to come down, or you start to, for lack of a better term, sober up, you know, and then you're kind of, you know, that hyperarousal, this thing again, begins to slip in. And then you need either to find a drug, or, you know, you steal something if you don't have the money. So you get the cycle that gets started. But this is a real opioids are a real bad mix, because of, again, it's man-made. So it's more potent than, let's say, alcohol or even methamphetamine acts differently, but it's a very dangerous substance. And that's why we have so many overdoses. And why are we overdosing? You know, again, sort of coming back to the meat of this presentation, which is historical trauma and intergenerational trauma. You know, there's a need to escape. There's a need to anesthetize ourselves, because we can't take the pain. We can't take the fear. Does everybody understand what I mean by pain? There's even like a spiritual pain, an emotional pain, if not a physical pain. You know, you might not feel good about yourself, or you might feel like if I don't, these attachment issues, if I don't, even though this person is hurting me, I got to have that person. It's almost like an addiction. And even through domestic violence, you know, you have people that stay with their partners through this. It's a really toxic situation. Again, Not the same, but very similar to the brain chemistry of a substance and how addiction occurs. Until you finally realize that your life is important. And just like substances, there's a way to get away from it. But you have to make up your mind that you have a problem and you need to go through the process. Instead of, when I say BS, everybody knows what that means, right? Instead of conning yourself, that you're okay, it's all right. I did that almost all my life, and it nearly cost me my life a few times. I've lived through automobile accidents. Let's see, is this the time that... I guess I didn't really get to that earlier today. I didn't mention it. One of the automobile accidents I survived was in 1985. I was on my way to a rodeo. Actually, I was with my father all day. We were drinking, telling old stupid stories about rodeo, parked at the rodeo grounds. We were drinking all day with one of my uncles. And then we, I was pretty intoxicated. And I just remember in the evening, I got in a fight with him. We got the physical, fight. And I remember my sister, my mom, and everybody's excited trying to break us apart. And I got mad, and I was riding in a rodeo in Sacaton. So I was already, the heck with this, man. I put all my clothes together and I jumped in the car and I drove, I was really intoxicated, drinking all day, And around on the other side of, near Heber and Holbrook, there used to be a T. Now they kind of round it. It's not like so sharp anymore. You know what I mean by T, you had to go and stop. And I must have been traveling like 65, 75 miles per hour, and I went through that T, and I hit this ramp, and I went to the trees, and my face went out, broke the window, and I hit a tree with my face, and it broke my neck. Cervical vertebrae 7 is a common fracture when you hit an automobile accident. So I fractured that vertebrae, and it almost touched my spinal cord. If it touched my spinal cord, then most likely, it's a paralyzed, quadriplegic, or so. I survived that, but my face, you can see if in the right light, I have a broken face here. My whole face was gone here. All the muscle, all the skin. I have porcelain teeth. These bridges on my, they're not real. They're porcelain. And I had, I have these scars. I mean, this is torn in half. I mean, it's like it wasn't even connected together. It's just drooping here. And then my skull, the orbit of my eye was open. This is what they call the zygomatic process. The cheekbone. There's a little dot here. They ran a screw through my face to hold up this zygomatic process for 5 months. I had to run around like that, and then they sutured my jaw, my teeth together because my jaw was broken, and so they put my eye back in and they put that screw back in my face, and the surgeon told me, you're going to lose your eye. We just it looks damaged. The what they call the optic nerve, that comes out of the occipital lobe. The optic nerve looks like it's damaged. So I thought, well, I'm alive. That was my big. So they put my eye back. They put the screw back in. Then I got one of those halos. They screw in. So I was like, had little screws in my head that held my neck. And I spent. This is at Phoenix Indian Medical Center, and they flew me from the accident site there. So I was there for probably almost 2 months, and then they finally took off that halo, and I still had to wear that screw in my face, and my eye was somewhere down here. It was my face was all really looked like scary. Quasimodo. I remember my nephews. They were scared every time. And I walk in the grocery store. Little kids were running away. Like what happened to that guy? It's like and so that still didn't change me. I remember my jaws were wired shut. I was sucking beer, foam through a straw. Just to get the beer inside. Talk about addiction, and I survived that, and it didn't sink in that I had a problem, I had something was going on with me, and then in 1987, 1987, I rolled a truck again, intoxicated. And I flew out of the truck, and the ambulance came, and they took me, and I made it through that. And that still, again, just didn't resonate, that I was gonna kill myself if not kill somebody else. And I lived like in that way, with what they call a successful alcoholic. I kept a job, I kept in school, I was working on my PhD, but there were times I would take 2 6-packs of beer into my office, in the science library, and just drink and say I'm working, I'm studying, I'm doing this, and I'm working on my dissertation and all this stuff. But I was just drinking beer, and getting drunk. And it wasn't until 2006 I was in another automobile accident. I hit somebody, but somehow I was trying to get away, and I was in a residential area. And the police caught me. My car was kind of on fire. And the police caught me, and they couldn't arrest me because I was in a residential area. So they just gave me a ticket, and then I walked home. So I had all these little near misses, and I didn't take it. I didn't, for lack of a better word, Creator was telling me something. And that it wasn't that I chose to go out and just do that. There was something driving me. There was a pain. There was a fear that was I was living through. The other story I forgot to say is that I was also really drawn to riding bulls, and it was actually kind of therapeutic, because if you want to be good at riding bulls, you got to deal with fear and pain. You can't let that overwhelm you, because you put $100 down entry fee, and if you that's a lot of money to waste if you're not going to focus on what you have to do. So I began to realize the impact of spirituality also. So that was actually kind of therapeutic, because it just doesn't apply to riding a bull. You can live your life that way too. You can look at the fear and the pain and do the things you have to do to perform, to be the man, the father, the husband, the companion that you need to be. So, I back in in 2009 is when that trip I drove home from Los Angeles in an alcoholic blackout, and I had an extreme DUI. Extreme DUI is what is it? Over 0.18 blood alcohol. And so I had one of those, and then in 4 months later, I had another one. I blew 0.25, 0.26, and the guy that policeman would say, "How the heck are you still standing, man?" Because that'll kill some people. And that's when I realized that I'm going to kill somebody. It's just a matter of time. Because I'm lying to myself. I'm not dealing with my addiction. I'm making excuses for the continuation of my behavior. So that was finally the last straw for me, and that's when I decided to do everything. I did Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps. I did Sweat Lodge, Lakota, Sundance Way Sweat Lodge. I did Navajo ceremony, but I worked through my sponsor. I went through the steps, and I completed the 12-step program. But it was also in Sweat Lodge that I realized that there was a way of living that I didn't need. It was satisfying. It was taking care of the pain and the fear I had. And that power to Creator, and the best way I can just explain it, and I apologize for saying this for the 9th time to some of you I've talked to, that it's like the light and the warmth is what I feel. That's the best way I can describe it. And so I talk to others, and I come to the realization that it's not one way. You can connect with this, the AA people call it higher power. You can connect to the internet. You can connect to Creator. You can connect to God. Whatever you want to call it. But you also have to do your part. If you're part of this energy, you got to live yourself in a way. You got to represent this power in a way. So when I look in that mirror, as I mentioned today, that's me as the net man. That's my power. All these things that happen for a reason. So I've been working on understanding that. In fact, I turned it into an academic exercise. That's where my dissertation came from, my work. So my focus is on this toxic stress. Again, when children don't have help from adults, there are changes that occur to the brain, and those changes lead to inflammatory chronic diseases, and also to psychiatric outcomes related to depression, alcoholism, or addiction. So this became the way I also, living through what I lived through, a way of explaining. Because I'm not stupid, I'm not lazy, I'm not evil. But I found myself in some really bad places. And there had to be a reason why. What was that reason? So that became, again, my academic work. When we talk about environmental stress, it impacts the brain, but the brain, again, as I mentioned this morning, this place of the mind, we human beings have an extra space in the prefrontal cortex, and that allows for a higher learning, what we call higher learning in psychology, that none other animal has. The closest might be a chimpanzee. I doubt it, but yeah, the closest might be a chimpanzee or other animals, but we have this part of the brain. And that's what separates us. But that also is the mind. But the mind can also be used. It's a kind of one of those things with, it's good and bad. The bad things is we can think about really terrible things and we'll set off our stress response system. I can think about going 150 miles per hour in a 15-mile zone and what that judge is going to say to me. And I can already feel my palms getting sweaty, my heart starts to beat, my sympathetic nervous system, my autonomic nervous system is starting to kick in. I have no control over that. It's something to protect the body. So that's that sympathetic nervous system and a release of all those pro-inflammatory cytokines and also cortisol that does damage to my body just by thinking about it. So if that's true, then what if I think about Hajjon? What if I think about beauty? What if I think about moving towards the person I want to be? What does that do? So the mind is just as powerful. And I've often, had conversation with my colleagues that are physicians, medical doctors. I say, you may call this phenomenon what you want. You can even call it a placebo effect. I don't care. But something really powerful happens when we believe that we can move forward, when we can get out of situations, when we empower ourselves. It's not just, I hope to God it happens. No, you gotta put a plan out. You gotta work towards that plan, either academically, either through addiction, or either whatever it is. We've got to have a plan, and you've got to do it. The arrowhead, Tatatin is the need to do it, the sacredness, but we have to have a plan. So I often look at I use that arrowhead in blessing way is also higher education. If we want to learn more, if we want to use our knowledge in a way that's going to help people, then that's the representation. The helping people is Tatatin, is that service component that we use. So what I'm saying is this is all, what the Hatashi say, what our Masana, what they say is relevant today to what we do if we choose to look at it in that way. If that makes any sense, So it's making these teachings, it's making this philosophy more practical and what we use in academia, pragmatic. That means how does it fit into everyday life? That's my responsibility. That's my job. And that's part of that is happening here, today. Am I going to run out of time again?
Just keep going.
We saw this slide earlier today, but again, there's two parts. One is that disease because of chronic stress or because of adverse childhood experiences. The changes to the brain lead to the release of cortisol, which again damages learning, damages the ghrelin, leptin. We get chubbier because we're eating more. We're getting hungry, even though our bodies don't need it. And then also, the plaques, and Alzheimer's disease. That's another area that's understudied. Is Alzheimer's disease in our indigenous populations. I don't see anybody doing anything. In fact, we just started talking about maybe doing a study that incorporates indigenous people and looking at Alzheimer's disease. But my component would be, how is that related to, again, this the intergenerational trauma? and again, related to historical trauma, related, and we'll develop a questionnaire to ask these people, did they survive boarding school, mom and dad, and then the adult children? What happened? How did that affect you? And then we'll look at their biomarkers. We'll look at their, is their cortisol levels high? Is their pro-inflammatory cytokines high? I just described the studies that we could do, but that's the kind of the stuff that really gets me excited about using science, using biochemistry, using neuroscience, but yet using the more practical, pragmatic behavioral characteristics. And we can even look at, okay, so we have this negative outcome, this disease process. What if we insert blessing way ceremony? What if we insert a sweat lodge ceremony? How does that change the outcomes then? Then we could take that and say, see IHS, see Centers for Disease Control, our ways work. The ceremony, the prayers, they have a place. We need funding so we can get more of these type of activities into our places. So that's kind of, again, that we all collectively need to start thinking about that. And again, I really wish that the outsiders could come in, boom, take care of all these problems. It's not going to work. We have to take care of our problems inside. We have to be the ones, but we also have the tools. And what that does to the nervous system. But we have a responsibility with the arrowhead. We have to do something. We have to, again, come to grips with the problems that we have. Be honest with ourselves. Just like the addict, the hardest step is to say, I have a problem. And to take that step to let the ego go, to let that part of your thinking, let it go. Relearn how to solve your problems without alcohol. That's what really recovery is about. Then you start living a new way instead of the old ways of excuses, of somebody else's fault, all these other things that keep you locked in to a bad situation or keep you locked into a drug or some other substance. So that's number 2 there. And I'm not going to spend any time on that because we talked about that already, the outcomes and where our medical care comes in. And this is, again, I just wanted to show you, this is old data. This is like 2010. And we don't have anybody from the Indian Health Service in here. So maybe they have more recent data we can look at. But those areas with red on the far right it's let's say accidents. Accidents in general are 2.5 times greater than the general population. That's how I read this. And if we look at some of the major issues of chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, it's over 4.5 times greater than the general population. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? What causes cirrhosis? Alcohol. So more people are drinking and they're dying from cirrhosis to the liver. Over 4.5 times greater or more than the general population. So what is it with our population? What is it with indigenous, that's driving that? That's the question, and that's kind of, the answers are really sort of we'll eventually get to the evidence, where we can propose some ideas and begin to take our action within our communities instead of waiting from the outsiders to come in to deal. The outside, it's a different paradigm. What I mean by paradigm is, the culture is different. They don't understand why we live in our hogans with dirt floors. They say, those poor Navajos, they're so poor, they're so poverty-stricken, they live with dirt floors and their hogans. But they don't realize the relationship that we have to the earth, that how we take care of our hogan, how we take care of our surroundings. They might see poverty as defined by how they learned that. But we see a way of living that's in unity with our Mother Earth, in unison with our Mother Earth, but also, it's environmentally driven. We have a task to take care of our environment. That's part of what being the net is all about. What one of the points of So anyway, my point is there are some areas here in our statistics that lend to trauma, that lend to self-medication, that lend to alcoholism, that lend to accidents as a result of drug use or alcohol use. And this is all, American Indian, Alaska Native. And I'm not even going to go into that. And I'm not going to go into that either. And as I mentioned to you before, the prefrontal cortex is what we call executive function. That's the part of the brain we do calculus. That's the part of the brain we do bus schedules. But the other important parts, the limbic system, is what that alert, again, when we have danger, there's two little almond-shaped structures called the amygdala. They get excited and they release, they let other parts of the brain go, including the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and the release of cortisol, but also that stimulates the adrenal system. And this is my representation of that, hyperarousal, what adrenaline does. This, I'm kind of getting moved by adrenaline right now, because don't make any judgments here, but I nearly needed to kind of get a really good kick in the butt here. I drove in yesterday, or last night. I was really hoping to get a good meal at Gennaro's. Gennaro's is closed on Monday, so I went over to Jerry's. So don't frown, don't. I went to Jerry's and I had a good meal there. So it was. But the point I tell you that is I'm kind of dragging around this afternoon. Okay, so I mentioned earlier the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is the structures that are also responsible for reaction. Mindfulness, synkesa, this is prefrontal cortex. You got to think about it. Our timetables. My grandson, he's doing timetables now. He's in 3rd grade, so we're gonna get on it on Thursday. But he's doing. There was a time we had to focus. 8 times 8 is 64. 6 times 4 is 24. We had to really think about that. But now we don't have to think about it. When we see a problem, we automatically remember. We use that information that we spent time with. That's what the basal ganglia does. And for some of you bull riders out there, that's the part that also allows you to move with the animal. And not just bull riders, but also sports. You don't have time to let it run through prefrontal cortex and all the other areas. That takes a fraction of a second, but then it's too late. You start to move, the ball's already gone by. Or you start to make your move on a bull, you're in the dirt already. So you've got to react as soon as it happens. And that's what the basal ganglia does. And so you focus, mindfulness, then it shifts into that part of the brain. Why the heck is that important in this? Why am I talking about it now? Because that's what recovery is about. We have to focus on the changes that we need to make. We need to exercise those changes so that when an event comes up, somebody wants to take us to the bar, we already respond to it. It's a part. That's how change is made in our behavior. That's why, in substance abuse treatment centers, that's why, the goal that we're trying to get is that people change their behavior. They're no longer going to the bar or getting that case of beer. There are other ways to deal with that. Maybe it's prayer, maybe it's talking circle, maybe it's seeing a therapist. But there are ways to work out some of this pain, some of this fear in a more constructive, in a better way that allows us to move away from self-medication with opioids, with alcohol, with anything, including, again, as I mentioned, there are some people, we won't mention names, that are using internet porn, as a way to deal with their emotions. And not only that, but they're using, I mentioned earlier how I use running. Well, I was just a running fool, man. I was just running all the time. But I wasn't doing what I needed to do, a job, and also wasn't going to school. Now this is the part, it's this autonomic nervous system. We call it the reptilian part of the brain. The reason we say that is if you're to go into Tucson, you're all invited to go to Tucson, by the way. If you're to go to Tucson, you'll see a lot of lizards. Now the lizard sees you. It doesn't give a rat's butt whether you're a nice guy or not. All it knows is you're bigger and you can kill it. So it takes off. It runs off. That's the reptilian part of it. It's the autonomic nervous system. It's there for survival. So our autonomic nervous system and our survival mechanism includes the stress response system. It protects us. We don't have to think about it. If we see something hairy and fuzzy, it might be a grizzly bear, so I'm gonna get ready to go. Ah, shucks, it's only a teddy bear. So then we can, but meantime, we got the hormones all ready to go, so we're ready to do something. But too much of that is damaging to the body. Okay, so in that stressful place, we start to go chronic diseases, and especially with women, and because of the molecular structure of cortisol and how it interacts with other hormones, we have autoimmune diseases that are more specific to women because of estrogen. The estrogen molecule gets affected by cortisol. Okay, so we already saw this. So fight or flight is on the right-hand side. The parasympathetic. Really, our efforts need to focus on peace and calm. Hajon. What can we do how can, like my little dog, Hajon for him is that I pet him. I say, you're okay. You're here with me. This is now. You might have got abused 10 years ago, but this is now. We love you. We care for you. So I'm petting my dog, right, if you're wondering what I'm doing. And so the dog begins to trust me. He trusts other people too. Before he was afraid of people. That's why he was aggressive. He bites, So that's the same is true with people. Like children, if they're always being abused, they learn how to use. This is a spear, by the way. I'm pointing my spear at everybody that's bigger than me. I realized that this is it's so ingrained in my personality. I don't realize I'm pushing people away. And they're aggressive people. They're angry people. And again, there's lots of reasons why people are angry. But the most likely reason is the hypervigilance, hyperarousal. They're always on guard. They don't trust people. And then you talk about intimate relationships like marriage, or it's really hard to have an intimate when you don't trust your partner. You don't trust. Then you start thinking again. Is he cheating on me? Your insecurities about yourself soon doom your relationship. And again, so there is therapy. There's ways of understanding that. Okay, so, and I talked about this enough, but just remember that through adrenaline, the hypervigilant, we couldn't really see this up this morning because it was cut off. Yeah, and then cortisol does impacts neurodevelopment, cognition, thinking, chronic inflammation, and chronic diseases. There's a lot going on that slide. Take us probably a semester, and I'll give you a test afterwards. I understand that. Okay, so as I mentioned before, cortisol is an anti-inflammatory. Acute means every now and then, once in a while. But chronic means all the time. So when we have chronic stress and cortisol impacts the glucocorticoid receptor, that's that GR. That's actually, just like insulin and blood sugar. The glucocorticoid receptor takes in the cortisol and it dissolves it. It gets rid of it. So it no longer has an action. But because of dysregulation or what we call glucocorticoid resistance, just like insulin resistance, it now, instead of being anti-inflammatory, it becomes pro-inflammatory. It causes inflammation. So this is my, again, explanation. I really, as far as why are the statistics, the IHS or CDC statistics what they are. And it's because they're, as children, because of the stress, the fear, and the pain. It doesn't have to be abuse, neglect. You can just witness domestic violence, and it activates your stress response system. You get fear, but that fear does damage also to your cells, but more specifically to your brain. And then what's our new science is this NR3C1 gene. Trauma is said to suppress that gene, but it's the same gene that helps the glucocorticoid receptor downgrade cortisol. So because of trauma, we don't have that ability. So the child, it gets worse. He gets anxiety. He's living all the time in fear and anxiety. So as I mentioned before, with women, estrogen increases inflammation, but there's an association to autoimmune diseases, okay, because of the molecule of estrogen and how cortisol gets affected. It breaks apart the molecule, and that breaking apart is associated with creating autoimmune diseases. And as I mentioned before, glucose is responsible for releasing blood glucose. If you're stressed out all the time, you've got a lot of blood glucose all the time, and insulin resistance is the outcome, and diabetes is also the outcome, again, of chronic stress. Okay, so I'm not going to touch that. That's a whole semester's worth of work about epigenetics. We don't need to know about epigenetics right now. Okay, so as I mentioned before, inflammation crosses the blood-brain barrier and is associated. That doesn't mean it happens every time with everybody. It's associated with anxiety. Because of that, stress We feel anxious. We're feeling anxiety all the time. Depression. There's a relationship between, again, this, the stress, the chronic stress, and then we feel depressed. And then anhedonia. And what that means again is that we don't feel pleasure. Life is dull. We just kind of, instead of bahajan, we're just kind of,
Is this the funny part on this side?
I'm sorry?
Is that the
Anhedonia.
Wow.
But so here again is that again we've because of all these symptoms, we've learned to self-medicate with whatever it is, that whatever stimulates nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental area. Those are the things that we're going to connect with. Okay, but it comes back around because we have changes that are occurring that lend to behavioral health. Again, anxiety, depression, anhedonia. And this is all written. I was very blessed to be part of this group that looked into some of these issues. This is not specific to indigenous people. I just want to make that clear. This is just all people in general. But why can't it apply to what happens because of trauma, because of intergenerational trauma and historical trauma? And this is I apologize for this. This really needs to be cleaned up. This is actually taken from a seminar I gave at one of the treatment facilities. This what we call a sine wave, this nice smooth wave, is the way it should be. Things gradually come up, things gradually go back down. We get excited, we gradually come back down from it. We're active, we get to sleep. So that's what this sine wave is. But because of trauma or because of stress, overstress, we get this really sharp, we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. And that's what, again, adverse childhood experiences. But as the child gets older, hypervigilance and hyperarousal, as I mentioned, that spear, it gets incorporated into their personality, and now it's like they're in this chaos. Life is chaos. They are always maybe high, maybe drunk, maybe can't hold a job, can't have their relationships with their parents, with other peers, is bad because that thing gets incorporated into their personality. And now that's agitation and anger. They look to self-medicate, maybe with an opioid, maybe with something, and these are the outcomes. So again, in real simple terms, this is kind of how I explain how that happens. And this is finally he's getting to it. Historical trauma. This is these are actual handcuffs taken from children that were forced away from their mothers and fathers. And some of us, again, I want to make it clear, this doesn't happen to everywhere. I have my mentor, Jenny Jo, PhD. She talks wonderful things about boarding school experience because that was her way of getting from the reservation into other places. And that's good, but I hear a lot of stories also that trauma was related to the boarding school experience. Okay, so we all know what historical trauma is, so I'm not going to spend too much time with that. But here are some of the traumatic events: community massacres, genocidal policies, forced relocation, prohibition of spiritual and cultural practices. And this is the one I think, again, did the most harm, is the placement of boarding school, children in boarding school. The forceful removal of children and put in these boarding schools. And so here are the outcomes of what has happened, what we see today: interpersonal violence, childhood abuse, neglect, poor health. Again, we went through the impact of inflammation, the association to addiction, the association to depression, and poor academic achievement because short-term memory is not getting converted to long-term memory. Academic achievement suffers, and if it's a whole community, because everybody's involved with domestic violence or getting drunk all the time, there's a chance the school is also suffering in terms of not passing enough children, because the state looks at that. How many failures did you have? How many success? How many A's? How many B's? Your funding is dependent upon the success of your school. So this is the work that I did in my dissertation. Acts of genocide. They're literally acts of genocide, and the impact to what we call historical traumatic events. But the outcome is cultural disconnect from wellness and healing practices. And some of the outcomes are, as we mentioned, post-traumatic stress disorder, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction, prenatal effects, impacting genetics and impacts. But this biology impacts culture. So we're stuck right here now. So this is a cycle that happens. But if we really want tribal sovereignty, you got to go think about this route. You know, how did this affect self-esteem and self-identity? And what is self-empowerment? The self-empowerment is, I want to change this. How can I change this? And finally, self-determination and tribal sovereignty. When I say that, that means we have our own attorneys, we have our own doctors, we have our own public health researchers, we have our own people that care about this and are going to look into this, not pulling people from the outside to do this kind of work. That's what I mean by tribal sovereignty. Okay, so this is just the intergenerational trauma. Anytime behaviors get accepted in the home, community, the family, it stays there. It gets, as long as we say, I've had enough, and this has got to stop. But meantime, self-medication, anger, manipulation, violence, and control, and then these behaviors. G to the nth power means this is going to keep on happening until we decide to make a change. So that's, I'm going to leave it here because I'm out of time.
Yeah, I apologize.